Hey guys, so I was driving the Squareback around last week and I noticed the red generator light here turned on. And I thought that was weird because really the only time you see that turn on is when you turn the ignition to accessory without starting the engine, or if you're driving and the car stalls out, then that light turns on. And that red light basically indicates that there is no charge going to the battery from the generator. So immediately when that turned on, I drove the Squareback straight to my garage and started diagnosing. Now, there is a way to test whether or not the car is running off the battery or if it's running off the generator slash alternator as it should. Now, in order to do that, I have to have the engine running and unhook the battery. Once I unhook the battery, if the car is still running, that's good news because it's pulling power directly from the generator and not the battery. The battery should really only be used to crank over the starter motor. Once the engine's started, it should directly be pulling power from the generator only and not the battery. So if I unhook the battery and the battery dies, that means the engine's running off the battery, which is not good. So I'm going to start the engine, unhook the battery, and see what we get. And the red light still stays on, so that's not good. So now the engine running on idle, I've already got ahead and loosened this terminal from the negative terminal on the battery. Now if I unhook this and the engine dies, that means the engine is running off the battery. And obviously it died, so that's not good. Now another way to check to see if the battery is any good or not is checking the voltage reading on it. So you have to use a voltmeter or maybe like a multimeter or something. I don't have my voltmeter with me, but I do have this USB thing here that shows how much voltage the battery's spitting out. So I'm gonna hook up these cables to the battery and see what it's reading at. It should be around 12-ish volts, and then once I have the engine started, it should jump up to maybe around 13 or 14. So if it doesn't jump to a higher voltage, then that means there's something wrong with the charging system. So I'm gonna unhook some of this stuff and connect these wires and see what we get. And as you can see, that did not jump up like it was supposed to. If anything, it actually even went down to 11.9. I'm assuming because we just had to jump the starter solenoid right now, so that kind of pulled some power from the battery. So I think the battery's okay. I'm gonna plug it into the trickle charger just to keep it right around 12 volts and it doesn't drain out the battery. Now I'm gonna tackle the charging system in the engine. Now that day that I drove the Squareback to my garage, the first thing I did obviously was check the engine. Nothing really looked too out of the ordinary except the orientation of the generator. There's this line here that's supposed to line up to this dot, and that keeps it so that the breather hole directly underneath here sits right over the hole on the fan shroud and blows air into the generator, keeping it nice and cool. But when I first opened it, you see the scratch right here. I guess maybe these nuts here were pretty loose, so while it was driving, this was slowly rotating this way, hence that scratch there that was created by that dot. Now because it was rotated all the way, don't know if you can see, let me grab my phone for a flashlight real quick. It's kind of hard to see, but you see that dot right there. And since the generator rotated all the way, this post on the generator marked DF, it pretty much was making contact to the cooling tin there and kind of stripped the paint, and I think it may have just grounded itself out. So I rotated this back to its original orientation, and in doing that I also noticed that some of these terminals were kind of loose and the old terminals on them were in really bad shape. So I re-crimped new terminals on them and make sure the terminal posts here are all nice and tight. And then some of these were kind of weird and loose, so I just jiggled it. And then when I did that, started the engine, the red light went away. So that was really good. But then a few days later, I took it on a far drive. I went to the Pomona swap meet the other day, and notice that light turned back on again. I checked to see if there was something wrong with the generator again, and it was rotated once more. So I made sure that this was really tight. I put Loctite on these. I think I'm actually gonna maybe put some kind of rubber underneath this band here so it prevents it from rotating. It looks like all my connections are good. Everything's good here. Unplugged everything, reconnected everything again, and the red light still stays on there. Now I'm wondering if, because that may have grounded out a second time, if something happened to either the generator or the voltage regulator that's located underneath the rear passenger seat. Now there's a way to test to see if the generator's providing enough power towards the battery. There's this page here I found. It's called speedygym.net, and I'm gonna link that in the description below. But basically, you are to test to see if the generator is working as it should. You need to disconnect all, I guess there's only 2 cables on this generator, but basically you're gonna disconnect both of these cables here. What I'm gonna do is also wrap them in electric tape so that way they don't touch anything else that they're not supposed to. Set that aside, and per this drawing here, I'm supposed to connect the DF terminal to the frame of the generator. So I made this cable here. So one will go there, and one will go to the frame of the generator. There we go, 22.2. Now if I rev it up, it should go up again. Oh, it actually died. Well, I may have broken this thing, so that's gonna go in the trash. But good thing I had another one. The only difference with this and that is that this has a power button on it. Obviously there's no power going to the voltmeter, so it's not gonna turn on. So I should be able to turn this on once the generator is started. Now if you look here, you'll see the terminal for DF. I put that cable connecting straight to the frame of the generator itself so that it grinds itself out. And the second terminal, the D+, that has the positive terminal on the voltmeter, and the negative terminal goes over to the ground on the generator as well. So what that does is, since the generator is still connected to the pulley, as the engine starts, it's going to want to start to turn this generator and then give voltage to this voltmeter here. So I'm going to start the engine, come back here, turn this on, and at idle you should probably see around 20 volts, give or take, maybe 21, 22. And as I rev up the engine, this should jump up just a little bit. Sometimes it could go up to like 35 or 40. But as long as it's anything over about 12 volts, then that means that we are good. Here we go. 19, 20. Now if I hit the throttle, this should go up. Okay, I just blew the second voltmeter that I have. And I think the problem with using these instead of an actual multimeter is that these are rated at a certain voltage, 9 volts to 32 volts. So I think as soon as it hits over 32 volts, it's just gonna blow this thing. So I have a second one. I'm just gonna leave it at idle, so it should be at around 20 volts, give or take. I'm not gonna bother with revving the engine up because if it does, it's just gonna surpass this 32 volts and then blow a third voltmeter that I have here. If the generator is running good at about 20 volts, then it means that this is actually spitting out enough juice to go towards the battery. Now where the problem lies is that in the circuit, there's a voltage regulator in between the generator and the battery. So if this is spitting out voltage but it's not going to the battery, then most likely it's gonna be the voltage regulator. Now if you follow the instructions on the speedygym.net If you run that test, this does not increase to that 20 to 30 volts. There's another way to check to see if your generator is faulty or not, and that's what's called polarizing. Basically, if you have a brand new generator or if it's been rebuilt, something to do with the magnetic fields in the actual generator itself. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't really dig into it that much because I found out that my generator is good. But if you're having issues, it'd be worth checking out that polarizing thing. But I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with installing the voltage regulator, and hopefully that's gonna fix my problem. You also wanna make sure to remove the battery terminals before doing this. Now, if you look under the rear seat on the driver's side, you'll see the generator located right here. This is the new one that I have here. This is an original Bosch part number. This is part number 30-019, I think. Or at least that's the part number that I saw online. And I gave that part number to the Volkswagen shop, and they told me that it's gonna be the same as the bug ones. But on here, it's stamped 190-040-099E. Alright, that was pretty difficult to get these screws out. Really, it's only these two screws holding them on from there and there. And there's just very little space to get in there, so I got the smallest screwdriver that I could find. I think you're supposed to take this panel off, and I don't know how to do that. Or maybe you're supposed to just remove this. I didn't do it. But it's totally possible to get this out if you have small hands like me. Here we have the two voltage regulators side by side just to compare them. And there are 5 terminals on these voltage regulators. You'll see 5 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This one here has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You'll see these two are actually connected, and it's the B+. This one here is obviously connected, and it's also showing B+ here. Here is showing 61. This one here shows 61 there. This one over here shows DF. This one shows DF, and this one here is D+. Here is D+. Initially, I was kind of unsure whether this one or this one is D+, but it looks like on the instructions from the box, it shows here this corner one is the D+. That would be this one. Which means I'm gonna have to recrimp a new connector. Originally, the one that goes here has the female end connector. I'm gonna have to just recrimp a new different kind of terminal in order to hook it onto this voltage regulator here. I don't really know what to check, whether this is bad or not, but I don't know, it kind of looks crusty as it is. There's also some sticker here. It's all in German and I have no idea what it says, but it also has like a schematic where everything goes to. But in any case, I am not sure if this is the absolute original to the car. It kind of looks like it's really nasty and crusty. So this is going to be a really good upgrade, assuming that it's going to work. Okay, this is the wire that goes to the DF terminal on the voltage regulator, and you can see it has this female disconnecting terminal that goes into this one here, just like that. On the new voltage regulator, it's a post, so I have to change it to a ring terminal. This one here is a number 10 ring terminal, which is meant for, I think, 10 to 12 gauge wire. And there we have it, ring terminal installed on this cable here. And that should fit this post here quite nicely. Here we go, now we have it installed. Now all I have left to do is just connect the cables back together. Okay, I have the voltage regulator all installed. All the wires are all reconnected back to their terminals. I have the generator connected with the 2 cables going to the generator. And also my battery is reconnected. So moment of truth, I'm gonna start the engine and hopefully that red light goes away. light went away. That's a good sign. I'm gonna check the voltage on the battery, both before the engine starting and after the engine started. Here we go. I have the voltmeter connected to the battery again. It's reading at 12.1. Now when I start the engine, it should jump to about 13.5 or anywhere around 13 to 14. If that jumps up, that means that the voltage regulator is good, and with the light being off now, it means that I'm now charging the battery. With everything now working, the last thing I want to do is prevent this generator from rotating again. I have this rubber material here, which I think I'm going to cut maybe a small strip of it and put it underneath this strap. Hopefully that'll prevent it from rotating again, but after I get that installed, I should be all good. Here we have the rubber piece cut to shape and sandwiched between the clamp and the generator. If you see on this rubber piece here, one side is textured and the other side is smooth. I put the textured side facing down so that it grips onto the generator, preventing it from rotating again. I really think that when this shorted out onto the cooling tin, I think that's where it fried my voltage regulator. So now with everything working, I should be able to call this job complete. I'm gonna go ahead and take this car for a drive and end the video here. Thanks a lot, guys.